I'm here to tell you, everybody look at me. I'm here to tell you that when you got into life with Jesus, you were to die. You were to end as far as being the one who dictates how life goes, as far as being the one who decides on the will of God for your life. You gave up on that, and you said, God, you decide. And the life that we live now is a life of humble submission to Him. A life of just saying, hey, God, you know better. I trust you. I'll follow you. What we're going to see today in Jonah is the life of a guy who doesn't get there. A life of a guy who would rather die, in fact, than comply with the will of God for his life. Let's look at it together. Ready? Jonah chapter 4, verse 1. It says this, Jonah was greatly displeased and became angry. If you haven't been here, you don't know the story of Jonah. Jonah's a prophet. God comes to him. He says, go to Nineveh. Jonah says, Nineveh? You know what you're asking me, right? God, Nineveh is the worst place on earth. These people are persecutors of your faith and your children, and no one should be telling them about you. In fact, we should be just rubbing them out. Smash them, God. Don't save them. God says, no, I need you to go there. Story unfolds. Jonah goes to Tarshish. God says, and he sends a big storm and a big fish, and he gets them back on track. Jonah, in chapter 3, begrudgingly heads into Nineveh. He says 5 Hebrew words. You got 40 days, and then you're going to be, you're going to have to face the music, basically, is what he was saying. And Nineveh decides to follow God. Now, this ticks Jonah off. Jonah goes into the city. If you're here last week, Jonah goes into the city hoping that God is going to just smash Nineveh. But God instead turns the hearts of Nineveh all the way to the king's heart. And Nineveh falls after God. And Jonah is livid. I mean, his side has lost. His team is not in the winner's circle. And he cannot for the life of him understand how God could make such a huge mistake. You ever thought God made a mistake? Yeah, Jonah's sitting there saying, God, you blew this one. Big time. And it's made him angry. Verse 2, it says he prayed to the Lord. He picked up the red phone, the hotline of God. There's not really a red phone. Anyway, and he said, oh Lord, is this not what I said when I was still at home? Is this what I covered back with you in chapter 1? I told you this was a rotten idea. He says, that's why I was so quick to flee to Tarshish. That's why I took off. That's why I put the running shoes on. Because this is such a lame idea. How could you give your grace to the Ninevites of all people? Look what he says, but I knew you would. He says, that's why, I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God. You're slow to anger, abounding in love, and a God who relents from sending calamity. He says this is like those are bad things. Isn't that funny to you? I mean, that's funny to me. Jonah's in there, and he's like, I knew you were good and gracious and loving and compassionate and slow to anger and relenting and blah, blah, blah. I knew you were all those good things. Darn it. And he says this. He says, I knew you were going to be that way with these guys. Verse 3, now, O Lord, since you've chosen not to do my will, I wish you would just take my life, for it's better for me to die than to live and see your grace lavished on the Ninevites. Holy cow. This guy needs like some Xanax or something, doesn't he? I mean, no, he needs the Holy Spirit to transform his life. This guy's like off the rails. I mean, he is so consumed with his idea of how things should be and ought to be that he is failing to see the greatness of what God is accomplishing right before his very eyes. That ever been you? Yeah, I think that's all of us from time to time. And here's why. We're sinners. Yeah, let's let that set in. And by the grace of God, we don't have to always sin, but we still fall back into that pattern every once in a while. And that sin nature that is in us, it causes us to do funny things with grace and mercy. It causes this. It causes us to do really well receiving those. Does anybody love it when you get to receive grace and mercy? Like if you've blown it and really messed up, but people say, oh, that's okay. Don't you love it when that happens in your life? Isn't that great? That's like a warm fuzzy, isn't it? But see, here's the deal. We love receiving grace and mercy, but we're sometimes pretty lousy at giving it. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, same situation, same offense. When we're the one who is the offender, we expect grace and mercy and love it when we get it. When we are the one who is offended, what is happening here? This is not possible. I am too important to, and we take a different tact. That's what Jonah's doing. Everybody knows the story of Jonah. It's the chronicle of those things, of God's grace and compassion, of his slowing, his slow nature in becoming angry, of his relenting. I mean, at any time in Jonah's disobedience, God could have gone like he was a grape and just ended Jonah. But no, God was all of those things, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and relenting in his fury with Jonah. But here's Jonah having received all that from God, and now he's angry at God for doing the very same thing that God did with him with the Ninevites. We do it all the time. I was golfing the other day. You're supposed to golf in foursomes. That makes the rate of play the same for everybody who's playing, and no one gets behind and blah, blah, blah. But if you golf with twosomes, there's always someone who's, swinging a golf ball, it's going right up your tail. So here's the deal. You're supposed to, as a matter of grace and courtesy, let the twosomes play through. But if they weren't such losers and had just found a couple more people to golf with, we wouldn't be in this situation. I'm just telling you how I feel. And so I'm playing Friday morning with some of my friends. I got 4 hours, a 4-hour window. I got to pick up my daughter at 12 o'clock. We started at 8. And so I got to get this thing done. I don't have time to wait for someone else to play through. Well, wouldn't you know it, 5 holes in, here comes, and I hope you're not here. Love you. But here comes Heckle and Jekyll, and they're standing at the tee. And I'm standing on the green, and I'm like, I don't care. You can stand there all day. We're just going to keep playing, because I know if we let them through, it's going to put us behind. Well, one of the elders that I was golfing with, one of my friends, said, hey, we should let them play through. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's a great idea. So when you know it, they played through. Who's the next group on the tee? Two ladies standing on the tee, which is fine. But I don't know who was at the gate there at the beginning. 2 + 2 = 4. Make them play together. Then we don't have this mess. But now I got to let them play through. Now I'm a full half hour behind our time schedule. I'm not going to, and this is not how I wanted it to be. And so my grace to those people is removed. No compassion. They come up to the green. Thanks for letting us play through. Yeah, whatever. But I'm Jonah, because I've been in the same situation as a twosome, standing on the tee box saying, why isn't this foursome just let us play through? I want grace, but I don't like giving it. That's a problem. And that's going to be a problem maker in our lives. See, because when we can't understand it going both ways, when we just want to be receivers of grace and not givers, we're always going to be disappointed. And anger is going to be the result, and anger is going to make a mess. This whole text kind of plays out like a two-act play with Jonah and God sharing the lines. So Jonah's first line there is, I knew you wouldn't see it my way. I knew this would happen. But in saying that, he's failing to see God's way at all. He's failing to even try. He doesn't care about what God's doing. All he cares about is what he wants. We can all be guilty of that from time to time. God returns with this reply. Verse 4, the Lord replied, have you any right to be angry? Have you any right to be angry? This is kind of God being like many of us as parents when our kids are freaking out over something. And we just come to them like, hey, buddy, relax. This is usually the one in my house. Can't you just be happy with what you have?